sleeping stories.
I gave you all I had. 4 words, spoken by a dying man on a mountaintop as the sun rises over a world that's already forgotten him. If I had to choose one video game character who fundamentally changed how I view storytelling in this medium, it would be Arthur Morgan from Red Dead Redemption 2. And before you think this is just another character analysis, I need you to understand something crucial. Arthur Morgan is the only protagonist in gaming history who the writers decided to kill halfway through his own story. And the way they did it, it's something we need to talk about. Because what Rockstar achieved with Arthur's character goes beyond exceptional writing. They created a meditation on mortality itself, disguised as a cowboy game. But here's what most people miss about Arthur Morgan, the detail that changes everything. When you first meet Arthur Morgan in the snowy mountains of Coulter, he seems simple enough, a gruff enforcer, Dutch van der Linde's right-hand man, the muscle of the gang who does the dirty work without asking questions. The game wants you to believe this. In those first hours, you rob, you kill, you intimidate. Arthur himself will tell you he's a bad man. I'm afraid, he writes in his journal early on, that I'm a bad person. And for a while you might agree with him. But then, Chapter 2 happens. You're no longer in survival mode. The gang sets up camp in Horseshoe Overlook, and suddenly you have time to explore, time to talk to people, time to see who Arthur really is when nobody's watching. That's when you discover the journal. Arthur Morgan, this supposedly simple outlaw, this violent enforcer, keeps a journal. Not just any journal, one filled with sketches, detailed drawings of animals, landscapes, people he meets. His handwriting is careful, thoughtful. He writes poetry, actual poetry. One entry reads, "We're more ghosts than people." Another simply says, "I don't know what I'm fighting for anymore." This is the first crack in the armor. But you don't know it yet. The game is playing the long con, and so is Arthur. Because Arthur Morgan has been dying since the moment you pressed start. Now, before I tell you about the moment everything changes, I need you to understand something about Red Dead Redemption 2's structure. Because what Rockstar did here had never been done before in a game of this scale. And the reason why, well, it's going to make you rethink every choice you made. But first, let's talk about Dutch. Dutch van der Linde is a philosopher, a reader of Evelyn Miller, a man who speaks in grand proclamations about freedom, civilization, and the government's corruption. He saved Arthur when he was just a boy, gave him a family, a purpose. "I've got a plan, Arthur. Have some faith." You hear this line dozens of times throughout the game, and at first, it's reassuring. The Dutch always have a plan. He's the leader, the visionary. But as the game progresses, you start to notice something unsettling. The plans keep failing. The gang keeps running. One more score, Dutch says. One more big take, and we'll have enough money to disappear to Tahiti, to Australia, somewhere far away where they can live freely. But here's what Arthur starts to realize. Slowly, painfully, there is no plan. There never was. The Dutch aren't leading them to salvation. He's leading them off a cliff. And he's so lost in his own mythology, his own rhetoric about being outlaws fighting civilization, that he can't see it. Or worse, he can see it, and he doesn't care. There's a mission in Chapter 3. Arthur and Dutch rob a stagecoach together, just the two of them, like old times. For a brief moment, it feels like the early days, the father and son, side by side. Then Dutch kills a woman in cold blood. She was a witness, a complication. The Dutch don't hesitate. Doesn't even blink. Arthur just stares. And you, as the player, feel something shift. This man Arthur would die for. The man who raised him, when did he become this? Or was he always this? And Arthur just refused to see it. We'll come back to that question, because it's the one that haunts Arthur until his final breath. But now we need to talk about Downes. Thomas Downes. Remember that name, because everything, and I mean everything, changes because of him. There's a mission early in Chapter 2. It seems insignificant. Strauss, the gang's loan shark, sends Arthur to collect a debt from a poor farmer named Thomas Downes. You ride up to his property. He's sick, visibly ill, coughing. His wife and son plead with you. They have no money. Arthur doesn't care. He beats this man, punches him in the face, while he's on the ground. And Thomas Downes, dying, coughs blood directly into Arthur's face. You probably didn't think about it twice. Most players don't. It's one debt collection mission among many. You move on, you forget about it. But the game doesn't forget. And neither does Arthur's body. Because what comes next is the most brutal narrative twist in gaming history. Arthur is in Guarma, an island off the coast of Cuba. The gang is scattered, broken, running from the law. There's a shootout, explosions, chaos. And then Arthur collapses. Not from a bullet, not from exhaustion. He just collapses, coughing, violently, can't breathe, can't stand. The mission continues, but something is clearly wrong. When the gang finally escapes back to America, Arthur visits a doctor in Saint Denis. You have tuberculosis, Mr. Morgan. It's quite advanced, I'm afraid. The doctor's words are clinical, matter of fact. He might as well be reading a grocery list. He gives Arthur some advice about rest, dry air, and avoiding stress. But both of them know the truth. Hanging in that office, Arthur Morgan is going to die. In 1899, tuberculosis was a death sentence. There's no cure, no treatment. Just a slow, agonizing deterioration until your lungs give out. The camera holds on Arthur's face. Fourth, Roger Clark's performance in this moment is breathtaking. You can see everything crashing down in his eyes. All the years of violence, all the people he's hurt, all the loyalty to a man who's leading them nowhere. And now, he has maybe months, maybe weeks. The game, up until this point, has been about survival, about the gang staying one step ahead of the law, about getting enough money to escape to a new life. But Arthur doesn't get a new life. There is no escape, no Tahiti, no redemption through money or distance. The only question left is, who will Arthur Morgan be in the time he has left? And here's where Red Dead Redemption 2 does something extraordinary. Something that still gives me chills thinking about it. The game gives you a choice. Not through a dialogue wheel or a binary decision, but through every action you take from this moment forward. Because here's what most people don't realize about the honor system in Red Dead Redemption 2. Before the diagnosis, it's just a gameplay mechanic. Be nice to people. Get good honor. Rob and kill. Get bad honor. Simple. But after Arthur learns he's dying, everything changes, and the way the game reflects this transformation is something we need to explore. After the doctor's visit, Arthur rides back to camp. The world looks different now. The same forests, the same trails, but filtered through the lens of a man who knows he's seeing them for the last time. If you open Arthur's journal after this point, the entries change drastically. Before robbed a stage with the boys today. Good take. After I don't have much time left. I can feel it. My body is betraying me. Every breath is harder than the last. I think about all the people I've hurt, all the lives I've destroyed. For what? For Dutch's fantasy, for money we'll never spend. The game's tone shifts. The missions become more desperate. Dutch becomes more erratic, more violent, more paranoid. He starts talking about rats in the camp, about loyalty tests, about sacrifice, and Arthur, coughing blood into his handkerchief when no one's looking, starts making different choices. If you let him, this is where your honor matters. This is where every small decision becomes a referendum on Arthur's soul. Do you help the widow whose husband you collected a debt from before he died of disease? The same disease now killing you. Do you spare the lives of people who've wronged you? Do you give money to the poor? Do you stop and help strangers on the road? Or do you continue down the Dutch path? More violence, more robbery, more bodies left in your wake. Because none of it matters anymore anyway. The game tracks this, and it remembers. There's a mission late in the story where Arthur helps a nun he's met several times throughout the game. They sit on a bench overlooking a train station. She asks him if he's afraid. Arthur, for the first time in the entire game, is completely honest. I'm afraid I haven't done enough good in my life. I'm afraid that I'm not good. The nun smiles softly. You're more than good, Arthur Morgan. You've lived a bad life, but you're a good man. If you've been playing with high honor, this moment hits like a freight train. Because you've seen Arthur's transformation. You've guided him through it. The game is acknowledging not just Arthur's growth, but your choices that led him here. But if you're playing low honor, the conversation is completely different. Colder, more resigned. Arthur doesn't seek forgiveness because he doesn't believe he deserves it. Two versions of the same dying man, and both are valid. Both are heartbreaking, because either way, Arthur Morgan doesn't get to live. He doesn't get to see if his redemption matters. He just gets to choose who he wants to be in the end. Now we need to talk about the people Arthur leaves behind. Because while Dutch represents Arthur's past, there's someone else who represents his future. Someone who depends on Arthur becoming better before it's too late. John Marston. And why Arthur's relationship with him is the emotional core of this entire story. If you've played the first Red Dead Redemption, you know John Marston's fate. You know he becomes a family man, trying to leave his outlaw past behind. You know the government forces him to hunt down his former gang members. You know how his story ends. But in RDR2, John is younger, more reckless, less reliable. He abandoned the gang for a year to be with his family. And when he came back, some members never forgave him, including Arthur. Throughout the early game, Arthur is openly hostile to John, mocks him, questions his loyalty, calls him a deserter. But after the diagnosis, everything changes. Arthur starts protecting John, pushing him toward his family. There's a mission where Dutch wants John to go on a dangerous robbery. Arthur volunteers instead. Let John sit this one out, Dutch. He's got a family to think about. The Dutch notice this shift. He doesn't like it, because Arthur questioning his plans is one thing, but Arthur actively subverting them, protecting John over the gang's interests, that's betrayal in Dutch's eyes. The breaking point comes in Chapter 6. The gang is falling apart. Micah, a snake of a man, who's been whispering poison in Dutch's ear, has convinced Dutch that there's a rat in the camp, someone working with the Pinkertons. Arthur knows it's Micah. He's suspected it for a while, but the Dutch won't listen. Dutch is too far gone, too paranoid, too invested in his own legend to see the truth. There's a mission where Arthur and John rob a train together, just the two of them. And Arthur, coughing up blood between heists, tells John something crucial. When the time comes, you run and don't look back. Get Abigail, get Jack, and you get the hell out of here. You are the man I couldn't be. John doesn't understand. Not yet. But Arthur does. Because Arthur has accepted something that Dutch never will. The age of the outlaw is over, and the only way to survive is to change. The Dutch want to go out in a blaze of glory. Guns blazing, fighting the inevitable. Arthur wants John to live. To have the life Arthur never got. To be the father, the husband, the good man that Arthur tried to become too late. And this brings us to the final mission. The moment where every choice you've made, every bit of honor gained or lost, comes together in one of the most powerful endings in gaming history. But before we get there, we need to talk about what Arthur leaves behind. Arthur's journal is his legacy. Every player who finishes Red Dead Redemption 2 gets to keep it, flip through its pages, see Arthur's thoughts and sketches immortalized. But there's something else Arthur leaves behind that most players miss. Throughout the game, if you pay attention, Arthur helps people. A widow trying to keep her farm. A German family being harassed by locals. A veteran who lost his purpose after the war. Native Americans being driven from their land, former slaves trying to start a new life. These are optional missions, side content. The game never forces you to do them. But if you do, Arthur changes these people's lives. Give them money, protection, hope, and in return, they remember him. They talk about that man who helped us when no one else would. In Arthur's journal, after helping these people, he writes things like, "Maybe I can't save myself, but I can try to save others. Maybe that's enough." This is what separates Arthur from Dutch. The Dutch talk about freedom, about fighting the system, about being better than civilized society. But his philosophy is empty, selfish. It's about hey is legend, hey is freedom. Arthur's redemption is quiet, personal. He doesn't do good deeds for glory or recognition. He does them because his time is running out and he wants to leave the world slightly better than he found it. There's a beautiful moment late in the game. Arthur is riding with Charles, a Native American member of the gang, who's become one of Arthur's closest friends. They're helping a Native American tribe being attacked by the army. Charles says to Arthur, "You're not a bad man, Arthur. You've just had a bad life." Arthur smiles sadly. "Maybe, but I'm trying to do better now, while I still can." And now we arrive at the end, the final mission, Red Dead Redemption, where Arthur Morgan faces his mortality, his past, and Dutch van der Linde one last time. And depending on your honor, you get one of 4 different endings, each one devastating in its own way. The Pinkertons have found the gang's camp. It's over. Everyone's running, grabbing what they can, fleeing into the mountains. Dutch, Micah, and a few loyalists are making one last escape with the gang's money. Arthur knows this is it. His body is failing. He can barely stand, barely breathe. But he has one final task. Get John to safety. Arthur fights through waves of Pinkertons, each gunshot echoing louder than the last, each breath more labored. John is with him, loyal to the end, but Arthur keeps pushing him forward. "You gotta run, and don't look back, John. This is over." But John won't leave. Not without Arthur. They reach the top of the mountain where Dutch and Micah are arguing over the money. Arthur finally confronts them. All the years of loyalty, all the blind faith, leads to this moment. "I gave you everything, Dutch. Everything." Dutch just stares at him. Cold, distant. The man Arthur called father is gone, replaced by something hollow. Micah pulls a gun. There's a standoff. and the Dutch walked away, leaves Arthur to die at Micah's hands. The ultimate betrayal. But what happens next depends on you. If you've played Arthur as a good man, trying to redeem himself, the fight with Micah is brutal but brief. Arthur is too weak, too sick. Micah beats him down. But Arthur doesn't beg, doesn't plead. He crawls to the edge of the cliff, watching the sunrise. The same sun he's watched 1,000 times on this journey. Micah points a gun at Arthur's head. But before he can fire, Dutch returns. He sees Arthur, broken and dying, and for just a moment, the old Dutch, the man who saved Arthur as a boy, flickers in his eyes. The Dutch walked away, leaves Micah, leave the money, leave everything. Arthur dies watching the sun rise over the mountains, at peace for the first time in his life. His last words whispered to the wind. I gave you all I had. I did. If you've played Arthur as ruthless, unwilling to change even in death, the ending is darker. Micah shoots Arthur in the face. No peace, no sunrise, just violence, echoing the violence Arthur lived by his whole life. Roger Clark, Arthur's voice actor, said something in an interview that stuck with me. He said, Arthur Morgan is a meditation on regret, on what it means to live badly and die trying to be better. The question isn't whether Arthur succeeds in redeeming himself. The question is whether trying is enough. And I think that's what makes Arthur Morgan extraordinary. He doesn't get a happy ending. He doesn't overcome his disease through willpower or find a miracle cure. He doesn't reconcile with Dutch or see the future he's trying to build for others. He just dies, on a mountain, alone, forgotten, by most of the world. But he dies as a better man than he lived. After Arthur dies, you play as John Marston for the epilogue, and one of the first things John does, he visits Arthur's grave. It's a simple wooden cross on a cliff, overlooking the valley. If you played High Honor, there's a deer carved into it, a symbol of peace. Low Honor, a coyote, a scavenger. John stands there, hat in hand, and says, I ain't a lie. He don't know what to say. Guess I'll just say thank you. You gave me a chance, a shot at being better. I won't waste it, Arthur. I promise. And he doesn't. John builds a house for his family, works an honest job, tries to leave the outlaw life behind. Because of Arthur. This is why Arthur Morgan matters. Not because he's the toughest gunslinger or the most skilled outlaw, but because he represents something deeper. The idea that it's never too late to change. That even when your past is soaked in blood and your future is numbered in days, you can still choose to be better, to help others, to leave something good behind. Modern gaming often gives us power fantasies. We play as heroes who save the world, defeat gods, and overcome impossible odds. Arthur Morgan doesn't save the world. He barely saves himself, but he saves John. And through John, he saves Abigail and Jack. He saves the widow Downs and her son. He saves Charles and Sadie and everyone else he helped along the way. That's his redemption. Not grand or glorious, just small acts of kindness in a dying world. There's a line Arthur writes in his journal that I keep coming back to. I don't seek forgiveness. I don't think I deserve it. But maybe, if I can help enough people, it'll balance things out. Maybe that's all a man like me can hope for. Red Dead Redemption 2 is a tragedy. It's a story about the death of the Old West, the death of a way of life, and the death of a man who tried to be better too late. But it's also a story about hope, about legacy, about how we're remembered, not by our worst moments, but by our last ones. Arthur Morgan taught me something important. It's not about how you start, it's about how you finish. And in his final days, hours, minutes on that mountain, Arthur finished as a good man. I gave you all I had. 4 words. From a dying outlaw on a mountaintop. And somehow, it was enough. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into Arthur Morgan's story. If you enjoyed this, subscribe to Loreforge for more gaming lore explorations. Next time, we're diving into Joel from The Last of Us and why his choice at the end broke the gaming community in half. Until then, ride safe, outlaws.